All right, so you ready to record some crap?
Yep. Just took my hands under my armpits.
Yeah, so this will be our weird, a lot of times I don't necessarily remember, obviously, what the weather and stuff was like when we do these random podcasts, but we might remember this one, the Carol Burnett Show, because this is literally like a metro exodus apocalypse outside.
Yep, deep freeze. We're down to, with the wind chill, minus 47, some places in New Brunswick.
Yeah, which even if you're an American with your wacky Fahrenheit, this is the one time you can understand what we're talking about, because somewhere around 41 or 42, the two scales are the same. So you still know what we mean. It's minus 40 no matter how you measure it, which is fucking crazy.
And we're sitting in a room that is supposed to be warm, but it isn't. It's freezing. Got to put our hands under our armpits to keep them warm.
Yeah.
And wear our coats.
But yeah, this week, Carol Burnett. So Carol Burnett's one of those shows that I haven't seen it since I was a kid, and it comes up a lot because it's a super famous show, one of these classics of comedy, and I'd always kind of sagely nod along like, yes, Carol Burnett, definitely, one of the classics. But then once it's time to kind of revisit it, to go back and look at it, I kind of had to realize, like, I actually haven't seen it since I was a kid, so not since like the 80s. I honestly don't remember it that well. I'm sure you remember Carol Burnett far better than I do.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I watch it all the time
Right?
when I can see it, when it's on repeat. So, yeah, I think it's a wonderful show.
So I guess my first question, because in my memory, it was just a sketch show. So I was quite surprised when I went to grab some episodes that these are an hour long and it's a variety show. It has all this singing.
Yeah, it's a variety show, and it's a mix of probably 3 or 4 sketches, and they're interspersed with famous people of the day, usually singers, sometimes dancers. But she had a dancing crew also that danced to the songs that people sang.
Right, and I see this is a bit of a trick memory in a way, where it's like I was right and I was wrong. Because I was going to ask, is that how you mainly remember it? You mainly remember it as an hour-long variety show with singers and dancing?
Oh, yeah.
Because I didn't, and I thought I just was remembering wrong. But that's the first thing I found when I started looking it up. So Carol Burnett Show ran on CBS from 1967 to 1978, 11 seasons, 279 episodes. But I was born in 1979, and after the original run ended, it was repackaged as a half-hour series, which has been syndicated more or less continuously. So all of the episodes I saw were only half an hour, with all the singing and the dancers cut out, because that's how it's repeated.
Oh, well, okay.
So any of the original Carol Burnett run that you saw were the hour-long ones, but probably if you caught it in reruns after that, you probably didn't see those hour-long ones. You saw the cut-down half-hour version. So both memories were correct, basically.
Oh, my goodness. Well, what a day.
Yeah, isn't that interesting, though? Because I just thought, like, wow, I really don't remember that show. And then I realized, like, oh, I do. It's just I'm remembering the reruns. Because
there were people on there who were big names of the day, like Bernadette Peters, Roberta Flack, the Carpenters, I think, were on Carol Burnett. And oftentimes what she would do in the hour-long ones is the stars who were famous singers, for example, would also be incorporated into the skits. So they didn't just come on the show and sing a song and then they're gone. Most of them, she put them right into the skits, too.
Right. But what I was thinking is, I'll get into some more details that I dug up about the history of the Carol Burnett Show, but I was just going to grab 2 episodes. At first I did the traditional first and last episode. But yeah, all of this singing and stuff, like, we haven't done a lot of variety shows, but we've done some, and I feel like it was probably applicable to TV at the time. But to go back, there's 0% chance that I care about any of the singing and dancing. I just don't care.
Probably not, because it would be very dated, and it would have been people who were big mostly radio stars of the day, and their hit song would have been on that show.
Right. And also, just due to the fact that they did repackage it as a half-hour show with a lot of that stuff taken out, they, I think, realized that too. That was a product of the 70s. That's not a format that was... And it's not how I ever experienced the Carol Burnett Show. So instead what I did is I picked 4 episodes. There is the first one, but then I picked some from the middle runs, some of the more famous sketches and stuff. And I feel like what we should do is watch double the number of episodes, but skip the songs because I don't want to sit through
Well,
them.
all right. All right. I'm sure I would appreciate the songs, but that's all right. I'll give you that.
Well, we can see who it is, but if it's just some random ass, because especially the 70s were the worst decade for pop music, hands down. Like the schmaltziest, the softest, the worst. So, I mean, we'll see. You know, if it's some amazing person, like, oh, wow, great, I love that song, we'll listen to it. But if it's just some 70s
Yeah,
thing
okay.
that no one remembers,
All right, fair enough. If I want to hear those songs, I can always go and hear them at some other source.
and I mean, yeah, like if we watch the full episodes, because there's also kind of, Carol does a little Q&A with the audience at the start that they also cut out. I mean, if we watch all that stuff, it's going to be 4 hours of the Carol Burnett Show, where it could be 2 hours of the sketches, the stuff everyone remembers and that everyone
Okay.
would prefer to see. So, I mean, you know, doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, sure it does.
Yeah, because I mean, you say that now, but I mean, I'm sure hour 3 and you were still just listening to these schmaltzy 70s songs, you're not going to have fun either.
All right, I'll go with you on it.
All right. All right, so looking up some Carol Burnett stuff. So her actual history, she was one of the very first women to really make a splash in TV. By 1967, Burnett had been a popular veteran of television for 12 years, having made her first appearance in 1955 on The Paul Winchell Show. You ever heard of that show?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I've heard of, yep.
And this was a weird part. I didn't dig too deep into this because it's just studio politics of the time, but they didn't explain this very well in the wiki entry, where Carol Burnett had this 10-year deal with CBS, and they didn't want to give her a variety show because it was considered a man's genre, which, talk about old school silly nonsense, right? Like, maybe a Western is a man's genre, or, you know, sports talk analysis. Maybe you'd call that a man's genre. How in God's name is a variety show a man's
Well,
genre?
if you had always had men doing it, though, and there were an incredible amount of men who had shows, but there were any number, and you know, when I think back, yeah, they were all men.
Right, but there's really no logic to that. Like, I do
Well,
think...
except it was the time, you know, women trying to break into anything in the 50s and the 60s was incredibly hard, and I have nothing but full respect for any woman that was out there and did it and accomplished it, because it was a man's world. And
Yeah, and it's one of those things, like, I'm willing to, you know, meet the past halfway sometimes. Like, if you want to say a war drama is a men's genre and Guiding Light is a women's genre, it's like, okay, I can see why you would say that. But variety show, that's purely, that's
sexist.
Yeah, it's just dumb.
No
It makes
question
no
about
sense.
it.
So, again, the details of this are hazy, but I guess because Burnett had this 10-year deal, and in her contract, she was kind of, you know, she could kind of strong arm her way onto TV for, like, specials. I think it was something like she had, like, 30, over the 10 years, like 30 specials or something that she was contractually set to do. So she basically kind of kept pushing and forced. It's like, instead of these 30 specials or whatever, just give me a dang variety show, CBS. And she pushed hard enough that somehow she made that happen. Again, the details I don't know, very scant. She does, though, apparently have a memoir she wrote and narrated that is probably pretty interesting. So if you want to know more, I'm going to try to maybe dig it up because I would like to know more, but the article I read was, I didn't understand how she made this happen, but somehow she did. So she was one of the very first women to have her own variety show. And then, again, as is often the case, these dumbass bigwigs that are just like, that's how it's always been done. Somebody forces them to do something else, and it became this super popular, long-running variety show that not only established Burnett as a television superstar, but also made her supporting cast household names, and it was nominated for 70 Emmys and won 25 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, anybody who watches any numbers of these, you can see Carol Burnett is so talented. Like, she can play any number of roles, whereas if you think back to the men of the day who were doing that, Red Skelton, for example, he played different roles, but he always played Red Skelton.
Right.
And anybody else like that, too, if you go and look at them. They always played themselves. They played different roles, but it was themselves. When Carol Burnett plays these parts, like, she really takes them on. She is that character. Extremely talented. And the people that she had with her, her supporting cast, equally talented.
So speaking of the main cast,
That's
just
the wind.
heard the wind rattle the windows. The main cast included, so let's see if you remember all these people. There's only 5 of them, but Vicki Lawrence.
Oh, yes. Vicki Lawrence, what I remember about her, in a lot of things, she plays she plays her mother in Mama, and she plays Carol's daughter in a lot of things. And amazingly, she looks like Carol. They're not related at all, but they look enough alike that they could be sisters. And Vicki Lawrence, what I remember about her, I think she was just some girl out of high school.
Yeah.
And I don't know how she ended up auditioning, but they must have seen the likeness between her and Carol.
I believe the story I read, because I didn't write it down, but I think she must be the one that wrote Carol a letter. She was a singer, I believe, and yeah, she was still in like high school or something, but wrote a letter saying how my friends all say how much I look like you. And then they brought her onto the show, and they did these Carol and Sis sketches that later, when they started doing Mama's Family, that sort of replaced. But it was Carol and her little sister sketches, because this person looked so much.
I vaguely remember. Yeah, those little sister sketches. But isn't that unusual? And she had red hair. Oh, it's amazing how much she looks like Carol.
Next up, Harvey Korman. I super remember him.
Yeah, he's so well known, him.
Right. Another one I don't remember, Lyle Waggoner.
Oh, yeah, Lyle Wagner was the good-looking, tall, handsome man about town kind of thing. And in the sketches, he usually played like the Biff type, whereas Harvey Korman was more like Joe, man off the street, normal looking, but Lyle Wagner was the handsome one, and so when in skits they really played that up.
And then the other one I do remember quite a bit as well is Tim Conway.
Tim Conway came later in those shows. No, he wasn't originally with them. He would show up on these little he would be a guest star. And then eventually, I think Lyle Wagner left that show, and Tim Conway must have replaced him.
Yeah, I believe all that is correct. Yeah, because Tim Conway, he guest starred a bunch of times. And apparently they brought in Dick Van Dyke briefly to try to replace Harvey Korman when he left the show, but he didn't stay too long because he just wasn't the same or whatever.
It's not the same.
And apparently by the end, I mean, the show, the ratings were slipping, but they moved it to a different time slot so it had less competition and it went back up. But after 11 seasons, Burnett decided to end the show herself because she'd grown tired of the weekly grind and she felt that TV was changing and that the variety format was on its way out. She called that one because, yeah, they just don't do that stuff anymore. And even the reruns, like I was saying, were repackaged as more of a smaller, more concise sketch show than the original. But yeah, that's the basics of Carol Burnett. So also, I'll tell you which episodes. So I couldn't find all the episodes, but a pretty good number. So I just kind of went through real quick and just picked ones that I believe in these episodes, something that we recognize will stand out. Like I just scanned real quickly through and I was like, okay, I remember this, I remember this, I remember this. So these should be peppered with sketches we remember and kind of the more classic stuff or whatever. I'm quite sure Went with the Wind is in one of these because it's the most famous sketch. It has its own entry on Wikipedia. It's like one of the top all-time comedy sketches on a bunch of lists.
Well, as I told you last week, when you watch Went with the Wind, you really don't have to watch Gone with the Wind.
Right. Between that and The Simpsons, I got it down. But I got Season 1, Episode 1 with Jim Nabors, Season 4, Episode 22 with Bob Newhart, and then Season 9, Episode 11, and Season 10, Episode 12, both with Betty White, just coincidentally. So those are the episodes we're going to watch. But the other thing that I figure I'll just kind of toss in here as we're watching, maybe in the middle somewhere, is I don't always bring up, because we watch a lot of old shows, so I don't always bring up the eventual fate of all these people because it just gets depressing because everyone's dead. You know? So anyway, the reason I bring that up is I'm pleased to announce Carol Burnett is alive and well and still acting. She was in Better Call Saul last year, 2022. And I didn't keep up with Better Call Saul. I think there were 6 seasons. I watched halfway through season 3. And it's similar to Breaking Bad. Like, they're obviously good shows, but the pacing just kills me. It's like very artistically paced, we'll say, which to me is slow and boring. Like the big moments in those shows are great, but I just couldn't. I'm like, I just can't. I can't watch any more of this. It's hours and hours and hours. However, I just found a clip that we can watch of at the very end of the show. Basically, without any spoilers for Better Call Saul, at the end of Breaking Bad, Saul Goodman, his crooked lawyer, has to go into hiding. So Better Call Saul is about what happened before Breaking Bad, but there's these flash forwards, these little scenes where they show what he's doing now, where he's just in hiding. And one of these in hiding things is he befriends Carol Burnett, who lives in his neighborhood. And yeah, it's just neat. I found this one scene that is, because if you recall, when we did sketch comedy, I picked a sketch comedy show for each decade, and the 90s one was Mr. Show with Bob and David. And Better Call Saul is Bob Odenkirk, and Carol Burnett is Carol Burnett. So it's these two sketch comedy actors that are in this drama now, and it's this super dramatic scene, and it's like, man, they're good at this. It's just interesting to see these two comedians do this dead serious scene.
Yeah, well, Carol Burnett has been in a number of movies. I can't think of what they are right now, but I know she's been in a number of them because I've seen them. I just don't remember what they are. And she's quite a good dramatic actress too. Not quite good. She's very good. She's extremely talented.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. So again, I don't know if I'll ever catch up on Better Call Saul. Maybe someday, but even we'll just watch that in between, just to get a little taste of what she's up to now. Because like I said, that's such a nice change of pace that instead of everyone's old, everyone's dead, it's like, no, she's fine. She's still great. So that's cool. So here we go. Carol Burnett Show.
CBS presents this program in color.
And this song at the end, it's like a kid show from the 80s. Like a lot of those kid shows I watched would be like, the Gentle Goodbye song.
And Joey does that little tug on the ear that apparently is that's like saying, I think it's her grandmother that she gets that little signal to, because they said that she couldn't say her grandmother's name, so she did a little signal instead.
Because it's kind of cool to have the little signal, but yeah, that would be pretty weird if she ended every episode with like, "This one's for you, Grams," So yeah, I'd say overall though, those definitely hold up, which is nice because when something is this famous, it's a little weird sometimes to go back and it can't live up to the legend of it, But I would say overall, I mean, again, the way we watch them, mainly just splitting it into the sketches, I thought those were really good.
Yeah, and they're very good actors in these.
Yeah, and I won't belabor it or whatever, won't dwell on it, but because it's obviously just a style of the time or whatever, and they obviously put a lot of work into all the musical numbers because they always have a premise and they have big sets and the choreography, and they don't just throw in a song, but yeah, that stuff doesn't work for me at all. It's like night and day, where all the sketches, I'm like, these still feel really sharp and really relevant. And like the Mama's Family stuff with the kids arguing and just all the family dynamics. And it's like all this clever stuff that hasn't aged at all. Whereas I feel like the songs, not only have they aged, they feel like they're from the 30s or the 40s. It's like, obviously.
When they did that Ziegfeld Follies thing, that would be back to the old stage shows that they used to have before movies and before TV, and
right,
people would go out to the theater and that's what they would watch, that kind of little skits and songs and dance. And
yeah, so I feel like they made the right choice in syndication by cutting those down, because they got more than enough sketches. They got 11 years worth of sketches. That's plenty, because it seems like especially because all that stuff is so quintessentially 70s to me, like especially just the dance freakouts, where it's like everyone who's just hippied out and gets some swirly effects and everyone just dances. Like they had some of those. And I kept bringing up Simpsons things because the Simpsons just constantly is, because that's obviously their era. All those Simpson writers grew up through the 60s and the 70s. So now that they, at that point it was the 90s, and they were like, what the hell was that? Why was everyone always dancing on TV all the time? What the heck? So they obviously relished making fun of it, but it's surprising how it really just is that. It's like the joke version of it is the same as the real version of it. It's like, let's just get all the hip, cool young kids to come in and do a dance. Really weird. But yeah, the sketch stuff was all good. Very, very good. Oh, I should say too, I guess those episodes I picked out, one of them had a Gone with the Wind sketch, but it wasn't the famous one. But that's on YouTube, so we just watched that separately, the Went with the Wind. And it's got like 1.5 million views or whatever. So yeah, I'd say like the Carol Burnett thing, it's still, obviously in the public consciousness or whatever. It hasn't really faded. And
yeah, no, it holds up.
Yeah.
It holds up because it's well written, and it's well acted.
Yeah, and again, even though, like I was saying, obviously the singing and the dancing didn't work for me, but it is impressive. Just like, I'm sure if you asked Brad Pitt to sing and dance, it's not going to go so well, or Keanu Reeves or whoever. Like, people are a little more specialized these days. You do one or you do the other.
You never know. Those guys may be able to dance and sing too.
But it's not a requirement anymore. Where it feels like back then, was there anyone who couldn't do this stuff? It seems like you had to. It just was part of the job. But that's interesting too, of just the idea that if you get hired because you got some pipes on you and you can do the singing. And like that scene we watched from Better Call Saul, where both Bob Odenkirk and Carol Burnett became famous for being comedians, but that scene was dead serious. Of like, oh man, is he going to strangle Carol Burnett? What the hell is this? So maybe if you can pull off the other stuff, maybe comedy's not that hard in a weird way. Like maybe that's the one that. But I'm also impressed by that, just that all these sketches were live. And I was telling you how I read that they apparently did 2 sets of tapings, I guess just in case, just to make sure they got it. But even just right away, like the very first sketch we watched where it was just, what's his name? Jim Neighbors and Carol Burnett just, it was a pretty dumb premise, but they're just accident-prone people at a ski lodge who one's got a broken arm, one of them's got a broken leg, but everything was like you had to time all the movements because I got to hit my cast on your arm and you got to do this and now I got to spill this on you. Like very difficult, I think.
Yeah, well, sometimes I think being a comedian is probably more difficult than being an actor.
Yeah, maybe I'm looking at it backwards.
Yeah, because if your timing is not right on with comedy, you blow it. It's like when you see clowns at a circus that are kind of bumbling around, and everybody thinks that, they're just bumbling around and they're not any good. But actually, if you watch them really carefully, their act is a lot harder because they've got to know all those kind of bumbling steps and how to recover from those bumbling steps. Those aren't accidents that they do that. They are trained at doing like acrobatic moves and reacting to the crowd and knowing when to, their timing has to be right on. It's the same thing. So although it looks like it's easy, it probably isn't. It's probably really, really hard because you've got to have everything timed perfectly.
It's amazing too how much of comedy really just comes down to the deadpan. There's something just so funny about a person being funny and not reacting to it, because there were some people cracking and trying not to crack up, but the one who never did, what was her name? Vicki Lawrence?
Vicki Lawrence.
Wow, that chick was like the Iron Curtain. She was never going to laugh. I wonder if she ever cracked up once in the whole show.
I don't know.
But it made her so funny because it's just like, man, like she is a rock. She's not going to be the one that is going to mess this scene up, Where, no offense to Harvey Korman, but he was easily the one who was having the hardest time holding it together.
There's certain specials that they show on Carol Burnett that I've seen as years come and go, and one of them is they show a little part throughout the years where Harvey Korman has cracked right up. And it's not just with Tim Conway, but it's mostly with him. Right. But there's other scenes too. And there's every once in a while they show them where, and there are very, very few of these ones, where Carol breaks up. And she doesn't break up like Harvey Korman does, but you can just tell by the way she lowers her head and she keeps her head down for the longest while. And you know that she's laughing, or every once in a while you'll see her shoulders kind of shake a little bit. And that's, she's cracking up a little bit. But it's very rare for her, too. But, yeah, I think it's harder, probably, to do comedic acting that's really, really good than it is straight acting.
And also, again, I just the live aspect, because that's also pretty rare. We just don't really do that anymore. Like, we still have comedy shows, but it's generally pre-recorded. So even that idea of, well, I always hear pro wrestlers say that whenever they're in a movie, they're like, wow, this was kind of easy. Like, I just sat in my, whether or not they're good actors, who can say, from wrestler to wrestler, but they're like, wow, we just sat in a trailer all day, and then I had, like, they let me do the lines like 13 times. So of course they were great eventually, you know, where when you're in front of a live camera, you just got to do it. And if you mess it up, nerdy wrestling fans are going to remember forever, and they'll always make fun of you. So it's like way higher pressure.
Yeah, and see, when you're doing live too, you have to be able to ad lib, and you have to be able to recover real quick.
Yeah.
Like if somebody's forgotten their lines and you've got to fill in for them, you've got to come up with something like right on the spot.
Yeah, that's one thing actually I noticed with Harvey Korman a lot, is I was very impressed with all the little ways he would smooth things out. Like just even in that final little musical number, because I was pretty harsh about skipping all the music, but I let the last one roll because I knew we were at the end. There was like a microphone problem, and you could hear the feedback, like just that high-pitched ringing. And he just, as he's singing, he just like puts his little finger in his ear, like like as if that hurt his ears, you know. And just that little way of like, yeah, we had a technical error, don't worry about it. Like, it's better than pretending it didn't happen, but you don't want to stop, so you got to do both. You just got to keep going. And yeah, it was good, just very impressive. And yeah, and again, I'm just not to be morbid about it, but I was just so pleased to see that she was in Better Call Saul last year. And, you know, we watched the clip and it's like, oh, nice. Because, yeah, you just never know. Like, sometimes everyone's dead. So, shouldn't end on that note. What else can we say to end? That's too...
Excellent viewing.
Yeah.
I mean, and when they can take something like Gone with the Wind and capsulize it in, 20 minutes? That movie, the original movie, is three hours long, I think.
Right.
And they've put it into 20 minutes. And I mean, she's a perfect Starlet. And Brashley. And the way they just fooled around with the names, too. And of course, it's priceless. Everybody knows that scene where she comes down the staircase. And I just saw it in the window.
Oh, yeah, that's where she just makes the dress
She
out
makes
of the...
dress. She's left the curtain rod in. So she's got these nice big shoulders.
Yeah, that was nice too, because even though, I mean, I sort of picked those, but really just because, I was just looking for, okay, episode 1, and I just saw, okay, Gone with the Wind, I'll grab that one, and a couple Mama's Families, so I'll grab those. But pretty much at random, and they were good. Like, you know, where a lot of times with these shows that we watch, I sometimes wonder, like, did I pick the wrong one? You know, because sometimes you just pick random episodes and they're just not funny, and I feel like we're not fair sometimes to shows because we got them on an off week. But I feel like they probably didn't have a lot of off weeks, and Carol Burnett seemed like a pretty tight ship.
And the other classic I mentioned last week that she did, they did the take on Sunset Boulevard. It's fabulous. Harvey Korman as Max in that is just amazing. And Carol is good too. She's wearing these eyes, or she has these big eyes, makeup on that the old Gloria Swanson, I think, is the actress that's in Sunset Boulevard. But they pull that off, too. It's almost as good as Gone with the Wind.
Nice.